welcome to Enemy Within, going out live on peoplesinternetradio.com. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Tom. How you doing, mate?
Sounds like we're in space from here.
It does, yeah. I don't know where that's coming from. Never heard that noise before.
Very odd. Are you there, Joe?
I am here. I also feel as though I'm in outer space.
We're joined to get today. Hopefully the sound will clear up. It seems like it's doing it now. It's 29th of September edition of Enemy Within Radio by Joe Hoban. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the guests now that we've travelled through the Van Allen belt?
Well, we made it through last night, so maybe it's just the aftermath.
I'm saying introduce yourself to the guests. Introduce yourself to the chat room and people listening at home.
Right, my name's Joe, and I'm an admin on Beat the Bailiffs and the Banks.
And tell the listeners a little bit about the subjects that you cover and the angles that you come from.
Well, I'm a bit of a one-off, I think, compared to all the others. I cover quite a lot of the civil stuff. Anything that's court-related is what I do. I tend to stay away from other stuff. But if it's to do with the courts, then that's what I do.
So have you had any experience yourself fighting things in the courts?
Yeah, I've been doing it for quite a number of years. Yeah.
So what was your first experience? How did you get involved in the field?
It was my job.
Right.
So yeah, plenty of years of experience in court. Mainly defending. And to be honest, one of the things that I do like about court work is I like interesting points and I like to argue technical points. And that's what I've tended to do. So some of the stuff that I come across is on a particular point, and that's one reason why I actually enjoy what I do, as much as helping people.
So you want to talk about the reason you were in court and what actually happened?
The reason I was in court?
Mm-hmm.
Which time?
The first time.
The first time? Well, do you know, I can't actually remember the first time I did go into court, to be honest, and I can't even remember what it was for. But, I mean, going into court was a daily part of life. I was in there nearly every day, so it covered a multitude of sins. Some of it was criminal. But the majority of the work that I've done over the years has been civil, dealing with all sorts. Anything from personal injury to debt, bankruptcy, civil litigation, boundary disputes, matrimonial stuff, you name it. It's all been in there at some point.
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what sparked your interest.
In Beat the Bailiffs?
Well, obviously you've been in court, and most people who were in this sort of field, they had some experience for the first time in court, and they saw the way it was carried out, and they thought, hang on a minute, this is not right. They're not carrying out procedures like you would think they would, and maybe I should research this more.
This is a little bit difficult. I mean, the first time I went into court, I think I was probably only about 18 or 19, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being very frightened about the whole arena of what I was walking into, because it was then a very, very male-dominated world.
Yeah.
And we weren't allowed to wear trousers in court. We had to wear a skirt.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's how bad it was. It was a very, very chauvinistic environment. And I think I was more frightened about that than anything else. But once you've cracked it and you're in there and you work out what's what, then, you know, you just work out that they are just ordinary people just like you. They are no different. They're no better. They're no different.
So you weren't intimidated at all?
Not once I've been in and I saw what happened, but that first time is a bit daunting, and I think it would be for anybody if they've never been in a courtroom before. But you can't be intimidated by something that you're doing day in, day out, because it just becomes part of life. And, you know, we all see and hear about corrupt judges and corrupt decisions. And, yeah, there are some. That some are absolutely horrendous, and you don't understand where they've actually got to, the decision that they've got to at the end of the day. But I've got to be honest, that's not the majority. It's a small number of cases. In a lot of cases, they're never reported, you never hear about them because there's nothing untoward about them. So, you know, you get the good and the bad in everything.
Yeah, one of the top things when we talk to anybody who deals with the courts or anybody who's in bailiffs, we talk to many people involved, and they all talk about the intimidation factor, and that's what puts a lot of people off fighting back. It's an intimidation thing.
It is. It is. I mean, I deal with a lot of the civil debts on the bailiffs when they get the county court claims forms through. I help them with the paperwork and the defence, and where I can, I actually go defend the case myself. And it is the fear factor. They don't know what to expect. They don't know the procedure. They don't know what's expected of them and what they're going to be faced with at any given time. And I can understand why. I really can understand why. Because it's the fear of the unknown, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. And the last show, I think we're talking to Paul Webster, and I was saying that it's not for the normal person, because the normal person doesn't understand it enough. He doesn't expect, or he doesn't know what to expect. So it's hard for the normal person. 'Cause a lot of people who listen to a show like this might think, oh, right, I can fight back now. But you need to research before you fight back.
You do need to research, but you know, there's nothing to stop anybody going off to the court and sitting in a courtroom for a day. Mm-hmm. Okay, you won't get into chambers, which are the like private appointments as they are, where the public aren't allowed in. But you can go sit in the county court and listen to cases. You can go sit in the magistrates. You can go sit in the Crown Court. You know, there is the opportunity to do that. And certainly over the years when I've taken on new staff, periodically, I would, at whatever level they were at, is take them to the court to see the environment that they're working for, because there may be a day that they need to go in. And I don't want them to be frightened or intimidated about what goes on and who does what job. I mean, there's all sorts of people wandering about and you've no idea who they are. They could be anybody. But once you work it all out and you know who's who, it's a lot easier. And it just becomes part of life, really.
You did mention before that we came on air there, Joe, that you were hoping you might be joined tonight by Michael Ough. Now, I see Michael's in the chat box there, so if you want to come on and join us, Michael, you're more than welcome.
He hasn't answered me on that question. He's answered me about another case where I'd like him to talk about it, actually, if he does come on. But he hasn't said whether he can or he can't. But it would be good if he joined us, because we both like dealing with court things, which is where I think this is going tonight. So he's a wealth of knowledge. Absolutely unbelievable guy. Mm-hmm.
I've heard him before on Mark Gillard's show, and he seemed to have an incredible knowledge.
I don't know where he comes across things and he quotes things that are so remote and so distant from mainstream that you think, well, where on earth has he come across that? And he'll just know it, and he'll know exactly what's what. But very knowledgeable guy, very practical as well, very practical. But I think Michael's another one who's experienced the courts, but from a different angle to me. Although now he goes in court quite a lot as well. And I think generally for like Beat the Bailiffs or any of the other groups or anybody that's involved in anything, experience of going into court is a good thing, because you might see miscarriages of justice, you might see things that seem to be corrupt. You might think, oh, actually that was fair. But it all helps, and I do think knowledge is power. So I think at the end of the day, the more people that can get into the courts just to sit, watch, listen and learn will be for the benefit of other people, because for some reason people shy away from the courts, and I don't really understand why.
Well, I think it's like we said, it's the intimidation. People are scared just to even go in and just observe. You know, obviously being involved is a different thing, but observe, and it's a fear as well. You just want, ooh, it's a crazy environment to be in. You don't want anybody looking at you. So a lot of people would like that. You know, it's like, who's he? A lot of people would think that. Who's this guy?
I'll tell you something funny that happened to me. I had to do jury service, and I tried everything to get out of doing this jury service, and it just was not going to happen. Anyway, I gave in gracefully, and I said, well, you know, can I bring some work into court? Because I don't want to just sit around for 8 hours a day doing nothing. And I said, yeah, okay. So I turn up at the court, and you had to go in through the main entrance where the security was. And I got a couple of box files with me, and I went through security, and then I went round to where you have to go in if you're a juror. And they said, well, you're going the wrong way. And I said, no, I'm not today. I'm going to be holed up for the next 2 weeks. Anyway, God bless them, the security guards called me work and everything up and said, they thought it was crazy that I was doing jury service, but there is no getting out of it. If your name's on it, you've had it, you've got to do it. And a lot of the jurors were new to the courts. They had never been in a court. They didn't really understand what they were there for or what they had to do if they did hear a case. And that was a bit that I found quite scary, really, that they didn't understand that ultimately they would convict somebody or not, depending on what their view was. And there were quite a lot of people like that. Some were quite savvy about what it was all about, but some really just didn't have a clue. And I do believe, you know, it's right to have a jury. I do believe in trial by jury. But I was slightly worried that some people really just didn't know what they were actually... They could listen to the evidence, but they didn't actually know what the charge was and what they were supposed to find somebody guilty or not guilty of. And that bit I found I did find a bit worrying, that they didn't actually grasp.
Well, I've never been in jury duty myself, but I know a lot of people who have. To pinpoint a lot of people that in my trade, because with government, we have government security clearance, so I always go for our guys for some reason. But they all say the same thing, that the other people on the jury didn't know what they were doing. They seemed like they thought that they just had to judge somebody by the character and not on the evidence.
I think that's right, yes.
We've got Michael just ready to join us.
Oh, good.
So I'll just drag him into the call there. He was just trying to call me, and... Hey there, Michael.
Oh, hello, Andy.
Hiya, mate. Thanks for joining.
Hiya, Michael.
Hello, Bill.
We're just talking about jury service and the courts.
Oh, I've done that.
What did you think of the other jurors?
So have I.
There were a couple. Well, the case I was a juror on, a couple were a little bit nervous at the deliberation stage, but the majority of us knew what we had to do, and we got on and did it.
Yeah, I would just say, Michael, that when I did it, I was quite horrified about the number of people who didn't really understand what they were there for or what they actually had to do.
Yeah, I did my jury service at Plymouth Crown Court. Now, there, when you report to the court, they show you into the jury room, which is down underneath the court, and there is a jury bailiff. And, pardon me. what they do is they show you a video, and the jury bailiff explains to you what happens and what you have to do. So you are given a sort of a basic grounding in what jurors do and what's expected of them and what they can do and what they can't do. I don't know if that's the case with every Crown Court, but that's the case with Plymouth Crown Court.
No, we didn't have anything at all. We just had one, well, it might have been a court bailiff, but I actually think she was a court clerk, who just explained, she went round in groups of about, because there were hundreds of people there, maybe a group of 30 and then another group of 30, and went round and just spoke to them and gave the most brief outline. And it struck me that the only time they really intervened was when it got to deliberation stage, and then they were quite specific in what was required of a juror. But to my mind, it was a bit too late. I mean, the case I heard, we had to go back in twice because some of the people really didn't understand, and they actually asked to go back and revisit some of the evidence.
Yeah. See, with Plymouth, there is an official at the court called the jury bailiff. They're the person who summons the jurors, and they're the person who looks after them while they're on jury service. So that's the way they work at Plymouth.
I didn't seem to be anybody looking after anybody where we were, but again, maybe that was because it was so big. There just didn't seem to be anybody around. All there was one person who called jurors' names out as a new case started, and that was it. The way it was done with us is we went up into one of the courtrooms. The clerk of the court would have a pack of cards with each juror's name on. As your name was called out, you had to answer yes and then go into the jury box. If your name wasn't called out, the clerk of the court would say, jurors in waiting, please return to the jury room and await further instructions. And then you just went back down to the jury room. Oh, they didn't do that with us. We were all just in this massive room, and they just put out names, and that was it. And then you would take now. Yeah, I mean Plymouth covers quite a big area, and the way maybe it's the way Plymouth does things. But we were looked after very well by the courts service then. I mean, I'm going back to about 2002. Yeah. But no, that's what they do there. They as soon as you kind of report, they get you everybody. Once everybody's in and they checked everybody's there, you're shown this video. Then the jury bailiff explains everything. Then you're all taken up to one of the courtrooms where they're waiting for the jury to be appointed. All the people taking part in the case, the defendants, the witnesses, police officers, barristers, they introduce themselves, and if you recognise any of them or you know them, you have got to stand up and say, yes, I know so-and-so. That disqualifies you from sitting in on that case. Yeah. And obviously that's done for a reason. That's to ensure that the defendant has as fair a hearing as possible in accordance with Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Mm. Well, I get that. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because it would be very unfair otherwise.
It would, yeah.
It's mainly because people team up. But even in a selected jury where nobody knows each other, people team up. And I was telling you that I listened to a load of people who've been on jury duty who I work with. And one woman said she got to the deliberation stage and everybody had just judged this guy on his character. And she was like, hang on a minute. Have you guys even looked at the evidence? She said she had to read out all the evidence again to them. And then they totally changed their mind.
Yeah. But, well, it no doubt happens day in, day out, does that. I don't really know what to say about it because so easily a wrong decision could have been made and there's nothing anybody could have done about it. I don't know. I think... I know certainly when it came to deliberation, in the case I did, that I wouldn't say we were led, things were certainly explained in detail about what was required, and the actual charge was explained.
Well, I think that's one of the problems, that it differs so much in the courts all over the country. It can be completely different from one court to the next.
Well, it can, and to some extent, so can procedure, and the way the judges deal with things are different in different courts. They all have their own peculiarities and their own way of doing things, and whilst they work within certain guidelines, some are more robust than others, and that some will take a view, some will be proactive in a case, and some will just sit back and let it happen. They are all very different.
Some judges act like a landlord. They like take over the whole thing. It's like they're proceeding all the way through. Nobody else is involved. You do this my way. Everybody fears.
Well, there's one judge that I used to have to deal with, who fortunately now has retired, and he was a complete shit. There's no other way to describe him. And you knew every time you went before him that you were going to get trouble. And it didn't matter whether you were in the right or in the wrong, or he was for you or against you. He was just obnoxious. And that was just how he did things. It was his court, and he did what he wanted, how he wanted, when he wanted. Appalling, really. It wouldn't be allowed as much now. He wouldn't get away with it because there would be more complaints about him. But then he ruled his court in his own way, and it was just horrendous. And yet you'd go to other courts, and the judges would be quite lovely. You know, they'd be quite helpful to both sides, and they would, you know, if you got a litigant in person, they would actually help them, sometimes more than they should. But to me, that was the right and proper thing to do, because why should somebody who's there on their own trying to do their best be disadvantaged by somebody who's armed with a load of law books and knowledge? Didn't really, should it?
So how did you get involved with Beat the Bailiffs then?
Oh, well, that's a long... Well, it's not a long story. But a friend of mine was a member, and he said to me, you should go on this group. And I said, why? And he said, there's loads of people getting claim forms through, and they need help. So I joined the group. No, he added me to the group. I didn't join. He added me. And I watched it for 6 months just to see exactly what was going on. And then I got in touch with Sylvie Ben and said, look, I think I can help. And she just said, go for it, and I did. And here we are. So that's how it happened. I would never have heard of the group otherwise. Would never have come across it. Having said that, I wouldn't change it for the world now. I love the group. I love the members. I love the way it works. Yeah, we get controversy within it, but then you do within anything, don't you? So
yeah, you get that in every group of any kind. There's always going to be different opinions, but the thing.
Well, there is whenever there's more than one person, isn't there? You know,
yeah, exactly.
You know. So with 29,000 members, you are going to get a difference of opinion on any subject. And we get some belters, and some of them are funny, and some of them are not. But by and large, they are a good group of members. They are.
Well, 29,000, that's good, because I'm pretty sure I remember Paul Webster telling me when we came up to Bolton in beginning of July, that it was 26 then, so you're still boosting up the numbers there.
Well, it is, and the funny thing is that we knock back more than we take on. You don't just apply to join and are automatically accepted. I think historically the admin team have caught a cold with so many members that they are actually quite vigilant in who they allow in and who they don't. And I'd say possibly maybe only a third of those that apply to join actually get in. It might not even be that. Because if they've got a profile that looks a bit suspect, shall we say, we don't need trouble on the group. We need the group to work together to get results.
you're fighting a common enemy, the last thing you want to be doing is losing that focus and fighting amongst yourself, which is happening all too much these days, don't it?
Exactly. And I think in terms of the admin team as a whole, it's a bloody good team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have got people experienced in so many different things who are constantly gaining knowledge and experience that I challenge anybody to better the across-the-board knowledge that we've got between us. And we've also got a significant number of members who also have good, solid knowledge. And they're there day in, day out, helping other people. So a credit to them, because, you know, they do deal with some difficult situations. They don't shy away from it. You know, they're prepared to jump in and get their hands dirty and help. And I do like the way it's working. It really is good teamwork. And that's what it's all about. Don't know whether you agree, Michael.
It seems to. I mean, like you said, Joe, everybody in the admin team has their own particular area of the law or particular area of experience which they know very well. And like Joe said, Andy, I've got my areas of specialisation. I mean, mine's civil law, criminal law, human rights, and policing matters, and civil enforcement. Those are the ones I seem to deal with most of the time, and the ones I feel most comfortable with. I mean, if it's an area of the law I'm not very familiar with, then I'll either know somebody who does, or I'll know where to go and look for it.
That's right. It's quite a broad area that you cover there, Michael.
Well, I'm a retired policeman, so yeah, that's where the criminal law comes from. A friend of mine who's just retired as a barrister, they taught me the basics of civil law. They said, right, those are the basics, the procedures you get out of civil procedures rules. Human rights, I've been doing a lot of that lately. I'm beginning to find, I think people are beginning to find that human rights, the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights are very, very powerful, which might explain why David Cameron wants to get rid of it. It is because when you kind of mention it to local authorities, they try to kid you it doesn't apply to them. Well, it does, and when they realise that, they seem to... The look on their face kind of suggests they've messed their underwear.
I don't think the Human Rights Act has been applied as much as it perhaps could have been over the years, because it's been brushed to one side as one of those European thingies that we don't really need.
What a lot of people don't... What the media are doing is saying, oh, this is something to do with the EU. It's nothing to do with the EU.
It's not. No, it's not.
The body that actually administers the convention and actually runs the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg is the Council of Europe. Now, there's only about 28 countries that belong to the EU. The number of countries that have signed the European Convention on Human Rights total 47. And two of those countries are Russia and Switzerland. Neither of those countries are members of the EU.
No, they're not.
So it just proves that what the Tories and the media are pumping out is complete and utter BS. And really and truly. But I know there is a lady in sort of the East Anglia area who is very good at ripping into local authorities using that. And yes, it has some pretty spectacular effects on these idiots who seem to think that they can mess people about. When they realise that Section 6 of the Human Rights Act means that what they're doing is unlawful, and Section 7 can have them hauled in front of a judge and they can have a new one ripped for them, that does seem to kind of sink in very quickly. It does seem to scare them.
Well, I think the results that the person you're talking about is having are phenomenal. She's doing a great job.
Yeah, there's another lady up in the northwest of England. I think you know what I'm talking about, Joe.
Yeah.
She's been using the European Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, and I think she stopped about 12. And the way she is ripping into schools, social landlords, all sorts, and local authorities is unbelievable. it is very, very powerful. I mean, there is one case which kind of is a perfect example of the Human Rights Act in action, and that is AA versus London Borough of Southwark 2014. The actual hearing was in 2013, but the judgment was handed down by Judge Thornton in October of last year. And that was a case where the plaintiff or claimant was illegally evicted from his home. All of his possessions were destroyed by the London Borough of Southwark. And there were about 3 or 4 housing officers who colluded and conspired to do this. And when there was an internal investigation, they lied to the investigation team. And, of course, it went to the Queen's Bench Division, and it was ruled that those housing officers were guilty of civil conspiracy. And because they breached a number of the convention rights, AA's convention rights, which meant by default they breached Section 6 of Section 1 of the Human Rights Act, they were also found guilty of misfeasance in public office.
Yeah.
Having that on your judgment like that against you, employment-wise, the chances of you ever getting paid employment again are virtually zero. Because with that on your CV, it's a kind of a case of, oh my God, you did something that serious. Ooh, there's the door.
But the problem is, Michael, what we need are for more people like that to take things up, because too many people are prepared to let things drop.
Exactly. I mean, Stacey, she's started off a human rights activist where she is. I'm looking to start a human rights action group down where I am in the southwest of England to educate people as to what the human rights are and how to use them. Now, the police are beginning to learn very, very quickly that their behaviour can turn around and smack them in the face. One did that a few days ago. He's now been suspended and is possibly facing dismissal from the force. What he did wasn't very clever. What his custody sergeant did wasn't very clever. Their senior officer, I would say, was sort of, he could have probably been heard where he was in sort of East Anglia. I could have probably heard him in Plymouth on a clear night. He was furious.
But for so long, the police have been unaccountable to anybody, really. And we all know how they operate. They stick together, and they do lie the way out of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I've come across it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's about time it stopped. And it's about time they realised what their powers are and what they aren't. I mean, we had another example today of Section 26 and them not recognising it. They have, very little idea of what that's about, and I find that quite daunting, really. I mean, I don't know whether you remember when PACE was first introduced. Well, you do remember when PACE was first
I can remember before and after it came in.
Well,
I can also remember when the CPS first came into being. Call them the Clown Prosecution Service or the Criminal Protection Service.
Michael's only
signs of age now.
Michael's only 21. Leave him alone.
I was 24, I think.
When PACE came in, all the police were on course after course after course to learn about it, and they all have books about it and everything. I mean, and they spent all the time educating themselves on PACE.
Yeah.
Well, why haven't they even just done a simple memo about Section 26?
I don't know, but a lot of them seem to have been on these courses, and I suspect they've been subjected to neurolinguistic programming or psychological reframing in a way that's very dark, because they seem to see us as some sort of enemy, and their focus seems to be towards brutalising people, stealing people's cars. Now, this ridiculous thing under 165 of the Road Traffic Act is no more than them trying to exercise a customs power, which was ruled illegal by a judge at Colston Crown Court many years ago. That's another story, and it was very embarrassing for Customs and Excise at the time. It was very expensive mistake they made. But a lot of them, they seem to do their training out of comic books these days. I mean, when I did my training at Hendon Police College back in 1978-79, we had to learn the law, and we had to know it. We were perfect. And at any time, any one of the instructors, who was either a sergeant or an inspector, would be sitting in the classroom, and one of them would say, right, what's the definition of theft, or what's the definition of robbery, or what's the definition of blackmail? And you had to be able to give it word perfect. And that's when we learn the law then. I mean, these days, they don't. I mean, half of them don't seem to know. They make it up as they go along.
Well,
Yeah,
that's right.
Sorry to interrupt. That's exactly what I was going to say. A lot of police don't seem to be versed very well in the law in general. They seem to be versed in how to arrest people and process, but they're not versed in the law completely. It's kind of similar to how doctors are not versed in nutrition, which is the building blocks of humanity. You know.
Right. Well, I mean, you've got dietitians for that, but with policing, I mean, PACE is the basic sort of framework within which you do your job as a police officer. If you don't operate within that framework, it's going to turn around and bite you on your backside. And when it bites you on your backside, oh boy, you'll know it, because you're going to be unemployed. I mean, when you arrest somebody, there are quite clear criteria laid down in the codes and codgy of PACE. Those say that an arrest must be necessary and it must be justified. You're not allowed to just arrest people just for the sheer sake of it. I mean, if you get indiscriminate arrest, A, it's unlawful, and B, it's illegal. And another thing I have noticed is that there's a misuse of breach of the peace. Anything, oh, well, that's breach of the peace. Breach of the peace, there's actually got to be a fight taking place. Not just because somebody is telling a bailiff that they're a complete and utter twat. That is not breach of the peace.
What's all this? Because this really does hack me off. Arresting somebody to prevent a breach of the peace.
Well, you've got to prove there's a breach of the peace going to occur in the first place.
Well, exactly. How can they anticipate?
No, there was the case the other night. Allegedly, it was under the Vagrancy Act. There was no offence committed. Then, when he got to the police station, breach of the peace. When a solicitor arrived at the police station and explained the situation, that's when the chief inspector went absolutely loopy.
Yeah.
Yes, he kind of tore the head off the custody officer and then tore the backside off the two constables and kind of jammed them to the sides of their heads. He was not a happy man.
But I don't understand why they think they can do it.
Because they think they can get away with it. The thing is, I mean, what it is, Joe, when I was a copper, a lot of the corruption that was going on was hidden.
Yeah.
Now, it's blatant and it's out in the open. Now, I've realised over the years that this sort of thing happens, where things come out into the open. It's not because of arrogance, it's because it's been going on for so long. Eventually, something that's wrong is going to come out into the open so it can be dealt with. And because it's blatant now, we can see what's happening, we can see who's involved, who's behind it, and it's up to us now to take down those people who are behind it and make sure they cannot interfere with the police. And I mean, there are police officers in the job who would rather not be in there. They can't get out fast enough. I mean, a relative of mine, he's due to retire anyway, and he doesn't want to stay on, even though he's been offered another 5 years. But no, one got to my door a few weeks ago to do with an incident that happened a few doors away. And when he found out I was a copper, he said, "You don't want to be in the job now?" I said, "No, I've been hearing things. What's happening?" And he told me, and it's quite frightening.
I bet it was.
Yeah, I mean, there's one across the front of the local paper down here. A couple of years ago, there was a young guy who was very disturbed, dosed himself in lighter fuel and petrol, upturns bimble two coppers, one with a taser. Instead of kind of trying to use their mouths, out comes a taser, taser, bang, and of course, what happens? Electrical spark, petrol, boof, up he went. 3rd-degree burns, transferred to French regional burns.
Yeah.
and he died a few days later. His inquest is taking place at the moment.
Have I seen something in the paper recently about that?
Well, it's in the Herald, which is the local paper in Plymouth. This happened in the Honicknall area of Plymouth.
Yeah, I've certainly read something recently about that because of
it made the nationals. And yes, it is very, very serious because it brings into question whether tasers should be carried by frontline officers. My own personal view on tasers is the only ones that should be issued with them are firearms trained officers, and they should be only used in specified circumstances. Unfortunately, there are too many officers abusing and misusing tasers, and if I have my way, I call all of them in and destroy them.
I think you're absolutely spot on there. It's very similar to a firearm. If you've got it, you'll pull it out.
Yeah, well, you see, what they're doing, Andy, is they are using it to get compliance and to intimidate and to control. And that is not what those tasers are for. It's for when somebody has a loaded firearm or something like a samurai sword or a weapon with which they can cause serious injury to either the officers or members of the public. It's to bring them down in a non-lethal manner so they can be restrained and then taken away either to the police station or to a psychiatric unit for assessment. But unfortunately, this is not what is happening. You're getting frontline officers who really and truly I suspect have not been psychologically assessed, because what they call firearms trained officers, they have to what they call requalify every 6 months. That involves them taking a test, firing the firearm itself, to show that they can still aim and they can aim reasonably accurately. But the second part of it is they are psychologically assessed to make sure psychologically they can cope with having to take someone out as a last resort. I mean, I'll tell you this now. I know guys who were in the Met's firearms unit, and they say when you shot somebody dead, it does stay with you. It kind of keeps going round and round. I mean, nowadays the Met have got one of the best occupational health departments in the country. I think they realised that this post-traumatic stress was affecting a lot of people, and it can be very, very destructive. And so they've developed what I would say is a sort of a world-class occupational health department, which really looks after their officers, especially those who had to go to the scenes of horrific road crashes. And some of the sights they see there are horrendous. People with the limbs missing, people who've been decapitated. I mean, it's okay me talking about this, describing it in words, but when you actually see it for yourself, I mean, it's horrendous and it stays with you. And this is why they've now got this occupational health, something called debriefing, to help officers who've been exposed to that to cope with it. They teach them a coping mechanism. So if it does stop, they do start having flashbacks so they can cope with it.
I think a lot of people don't understand how horrendous and how traumatic the job of being a police officer is. You're going from one call where it could be a domestic to a death. You're all over the place.
The worst ones, Andy, are the ones that the transport police deal with. You get people. What they'll do is they'll stand on a track and wait for an express train to come down and knock them out. The trouble is, when somebody gets hit by an express train going at full belt, the body literally explodes. Now, I know a guy who was just walked into a psychiatric unit one night. He was a train driver, and he had had so many suicides that he just couldn't take any more. And he described one where the person was standing in the track. First he saw was when it caught, this was at night, he caught it in the headlamps of the Intercity 125 he was driving. He slammed the brakes on. It hit the person who was standing on the track, and their head came off and kind of bounced off the windscreen of the train. But I also know a former British Transport Police officer who said when they had one of these during the day, you kind of went for about 2 miles down the track and you find bits of the body kind of strewn kind of on the track itself and at the side of the track. I mean, if you've got an Intercity 125 and a full bike, it can take about 2 or 3 miles to come to a complete halt. because of the speed it's travelling at. So you're going to find body parts kind of strewn over quite a wide area, and it's not very pleasant having to go along with a bag and a pair of tongs and just pick up these bits of body. Yeah. And you're thinking, and that used to be a human being. Mm. It is quite horrendous.
I've got a mate who just retired train driver, and he was telling me he never actually was unfortunate enough to hit a person, but he did once hit a cow, and he said that made a hell of a mess, and it took a...
Oh, it does.
I have to agree with Michael, though. I think that is possibly the worst experience anybody can have having to deal with that. That is... I mean, to be honest, the police take, like, sudden deaths and things like that a bit in the step. They don't be that bothered about...
There's this very black gallows sense of humour. I mean, there's one I can remember. When I was in London, we had a call to an incident at a converted townhouse in Pimlico, and somebody had reported quite a strong smell. Well, somebody broke one of the guys on the previous shift broke in, and the guy had slit his wrists and bled to death, and he was slumped in a chair. Well, as soon as I booked on duty for the late shift, they said, "I'll go down and relieve him, Mike." So I said, "Fine." So I went down there. I mean, the smell was still hanging about, and it's you can't, as a smell you never forget. But you start cracking the most awful puns to kind of cope with it. And as we were standing in the doorway, kind of making notes on it, these two young students came up the stairs, and one of them said, "Oh, has someone died?" And I said, me being me, I said, "No, actually, it's mate. He had a dodgy curry last night." And they went, "Oh," and he went up. He said, "I'll bloody get you on night shift," and he did. But you don't. But you've got this very black gallows sense of humour that you kind of use as a coping mechanism with things like that. I mean, the last police force I was with, the Ministry of Defence Police, we had guys on the police launches that covered the two rivers around the Plymouth area. And, some of the sites they used to pull out of the rivers, I think that if people are eating their tea, I don't think they'd appreciate me describing some of the things they pulled out of the river.
I think, getting back to the training that they get now, though, I think, yes, you're right about occupational health. I think that wasn't there years ago, which it is now. And they were pretty much just left to get on with it and recover from whatever they'd had to face. But I think getting back to what we were saying about knowing the law and how to deal with it, I think that is absolutely flawed these days, that they just don't know. Today's example, a PCSO turned up and didn't have a clue.
They won't, because they're not even sworn constables.
I know, but he had absolutely not a clue. Now, what are these people doing on the streets?
Plastic policemen. This is what I mean. When David Blunkett brought them in, they were called plastic policemen, and that's one thing. I mean, it depends on the police force involved. I mean, my local police force down in Cornwall, the PCSOs they've got, they use them mainly as intelligence gatherers, and I have to speak out as I find they do a bloody good job. They are bloody good intelligence gatherers, and after about 12 months, they had a pretty good idea of what was going on within Plymouth city centre, both during the day and at night. And they could more or less take you to where they knew that drugs were being dealt. With the result that the drugs problem in the city centre was, the drug dealers began to realise they were being watched, and that the police knew exactly where they were operating from, and it reduced dramatically. So, yes, I mean, if PCSOs are used correctly, and they're not used as a cheap replacement for a sworn officer, they're used in that way as an intelligence gatherer, they can be very, very effective, but it all depends on how the local commanders, normally chief superintendents, how they use them, and deploy them, and how the chief constable decides to deploy PCSOs.
But you see, I think what happens generally is that they're deployed to a job because it's the easy option. I will get them to do it and leave our own to deal with more serious things, when in actual fact they're not actually taking account of the incident that they're actually going to.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just a routine
Big
matter.
difference.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just a routine matter, yeah, I mean, perhaps a PCSO can deal with it. But, I mean, if it's something that needs a power that is only conferred on someone holding the officer constable, then it has to be a sworn officer. Yeah. You cannot send PCSO to deal with it.
But unfortunately, it's happening.
I know it's happening, and I can see it in a minute. It is going to turn around and bite the police on their backsides hard, and it's going to draw blood. Now, that incident in Manchester, I think it was earlier on today.
It was, yeah.
I mean, the police really do need, those officers really do need their backsides kicking.
Well, it's just pure ignorance.
Yeah, that actually ties into something that came up on last week's Tuesday night chat when we had Delroy and Rob Freeman on, and Rob was saying that health and safety law can be very useful to us when we're trying to tackle the police, the court system, and pretty much anybody else, because it pointed out that health and safety law pretty much overrides everything else. And if you can inform these people that you are either A, being harmed, or B, at risk of being harmed, or feel that you're at risk of being harmed, then they've got to go away and do a risk assessment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Andy. Now, I'll tell you where the worst offenders are for not carrying out risk assessments. Yeah, Joe knows what I'm talking about. The bailiffs are the worst offenders.
Do they know what a risk assessment is?
I know. I saw a letter from one bailiff. We would have carried out. So I rang him up. I said, what do you mean would have? Oh, well, we would have. I said, you do realise that they are a legal requirement. They're mandatory. Oh, no, they're not. I said, read the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999. Regulation 3. And she pulled it up and she went, oh, shit. Yeah, so... But the thing is, I mean, I think Joe probably remember this case. There was, with pregnancies, with court fines, and any form of civil enforcement, a pregnant lady is considered vulnerable from the 14th week of pregnancy right through to the birth, and then for up to 26 weeks after the birth. Now, there are two conditions where there is a very high risk of a condition called preeclampsia, where the mother's blood pressure goes shooting up, and it is life-threatening. One's called Hughes syndrome, and the other one is called HELLP syndrome. Now, I mean, I cannot sort of stress how dangerous a preeclampsia can be. It can kill the mother and it can kill the baby as well. When you've got these, some of them are no more than louts, some of them are no more than thugs, and some of them are no more than house-trained baboons. They just do not give a monkeys about health and safety. Yet the thing is that their failure to abide by health and safety law could send them to prison for a minimum of about 12 months, or if they're unlucky enough to go before a judge and jury, they could go to prison for up to 2 years. But the thing is, they can also, if they go to the Crown Court, they can also get an unlimited fine as well, and in the magistrates, they can also get a £20,000 fine, up to a £20,000 fine, and up to 12 months in prison. So they really and truly do need to get their act together, and they do need to start obeying the law. It's not a sort of an optional, compliance is optional. It is mandatory. I'm just waiting for one of them to really seriously mess up and get done. Because when it does, I think that's what it needs.
That's what it needs. I mean, we face these problems day in, day out. Yeah. And the problem is that afterwards, people are so fed up with what's happened, they're so traumatised by what's happened, they don't want to take it any further.
Yeah.
It's just, that's it, it's done, it's dusted, end of. And it's like, no, please. But they won't do it. And, you know, we can't do it for them. We can encourage them to do it, but we can't make them do it. Now, from the stuff I've been dealing with more recently, we are getting people who are being more proactive in making complaints and taking matters further, and they're getting success.
Oh, yeah. Would you be mentioning a certain...
That might be.
yes, who is did something very, very stupid and is now facing some very, very serious charges.
Well, he is, yes.
Yeah, so I think you know about the one I've got down where I am, where a certain bailiff from a certain company went and twatted a debtor and then went and lied to the police. And unfortunately, I'm now involved in the case, and yes, a certain local authority is... they seem to be running off to change their underpants every 5 minutes.
I think the thing is that what they fail to understand is that they can face criminal charges. It's not just a question of, you know, a debtor writing in a letter of complaint or indeed completing the EAC2 and bringing them before the circuit judge. You know, if their actions are such, then yes, they can be charged with an offence because they do commit them.
Well, the case I'm dealing with down here, the bailiff could possibly be charged with perverting the course of justice, and that carries a maximum of up to life imprisonment. Other people could be facing charges of under the County Courts Act. That carries a maximum penalty of up to 7 years in prison. Possibly there could be fraud. I don't know. I'm currently putting together a submission to send to the CPS because it turns out the CPS weren't given the full details at the time by the police, and the police have basically just tried to protect the bailiff, or so it would seem.
Yeah.
That is the case, then, believe you me, my next stage is the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I will ask him to start ripping into the police, starting with the Chief Constable.
Well, we've got two bailiffs who are upon two charges of perverting the course of justice, and they've just been reported a second time.
Oh, for crying out loud. What, they've been caught doing it again?
Yeah.
Are they on bail?
Yeah.
Oh dear, that means they could be remanded into custody because that's committing offences whilst on bail.
Well, I think it is, but the offence was committed before they were prosecuted or before they were charged for the first offence, so it's a bit of a technicality, is that? But
well, yeah.
But
yeah,
the point is that they've now... The person that they've done it to is a judge.
Oh, God. Oh dear. Not a good idea. Yes, that's something by the sound of it. I think they aren't exactly going to be on that judge's Christmas card list this year.
Yeah, they really are in trouble, and the trouble is these two go around as a team, and well, I think one thinks he is above the law, definitely.
Yes, I gather that. Yeah, is it a case that one of them impersonated the other in a court case?
That's correct.
Oh, for crying out loud.
That's correct.
That is serious. They will be in very serious trouble over that. I would never be surprised to hear they gone down. I think they can. Well, I think they can kiss goodbye to their bailiff certificates for good.
Well, that's what we want.
I think that may well be the case. I mean, there was a case down on the south coast some years ago where a bailiff made indecent suggestions to somebody, and he was reported to the police. He was indicted. And the day before the hearing, he rather stupidly rang up the complainant, claiming to be a solicitor and offering an inducement. The person had the good sense to ring the police. They knew exactly where they managed to trace the call, went round, arrested him. He was held overnight in the cells, put him in front of the judge. The judge was told what he'd done. Luckily, the guy pleaded guilty to all charges, but it's what he got. 4 years inside.
Yeah.
Sex offenders register for life. He was also banned from working with children, working with vulnerable adults. He was banned from working in the financial services industry, anything public office, public service. Yeah, the judge really laid into him.
Yeah, I had one over the weekend where a bailiff's been posting a debtor's telephone number offering her services for sex.
Oh dear, that is going to be very well. I mean, he does realize that idiot does realise that the information commissioner could not only fine him, but also his company and the creditor up to £500,000.
I don't think they realise at all. But my worrying thing is, all these problem cases that I seem to come across all go to one company.
Oh yeah. There's 2 or 3 companies that are malfeasant.
Yeah, but
I mean, doing that may well amount to harassment.
It's bloody outrageous.
Well, the thing is, I mean, if you go posting false or malicious things like that on a public forum, like the internet, yes, it probably is defamation, but it can also be harassment under the Protection from Harassment Act.
Well, the girl was terrified.
Yeah, if it had been me, I'd have
absolutely terrified.
I mean, what was the creditor? Was it a local authority or the courts? I mean, if it was,
I don't remember off the top of my head.
No way the courts would have condoned that sort of behaviour.
Well, I don't think they know about it yet.
Or when they do, I don't think they're going to be very pleased. In fact, I wouldn't mind betting if it's a court fine, that suddenly disappears because you cannot. I mean, no, that bailiff has got to face a criminal prosecution for doing that.
It's a female bailiff.
Yeah, but they don't work for Marston's, do they?
No.
Not up in the northwest. If it's who I think it is, they really are cruising for a bruising.
It is in the northwest.
Yeah, it's got to be. It can only be one of two. One of them tried it on with somebody. A lady was recovering from cancer. I got hold of the chief executive of Marston's. I'll give the guy his due. He was brilliant. He got hold of the the woman's bailiff manager, and yeah, they were the bailiff manager went round and apologised and said, no, she shouldn't have done that.
Well, no.
But he couldn't understand how I got out of the CEO's email address.
You use it regularly.
Not so much now, because he's not so much involved with the running of Masters, because obviously it's a bigger group, so he's just a director now. He's not the CEO anymore.
Mm.
But no, he and his PA were very, very helpful when we were having problems. I mean, the infamous Debbie Yilmaz.
Bless
we all know Debbie Yilmaz, so does Chrissy Morris. He decided to do something stupid and left a clamp on a third-party vehicle for about nearly 48 hours. As soon as Essex police were not impressed with him, they wanted to kind of pump him in inverted commas. One phone call, hour later, it was off.
Yeah. But he's another one that just thinks he can do what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, and he really pisses Chrissy off, and I'm not surprised.
I can see Yilmaz getting his comeuppance sooner or later. In a minute, he's going to cross the line, and that'll be it. I can see a savvy copper is going to say, right, pal, you've crossed the line, you're next.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. Yilmaz will be no more as a bailiff.
But the trouble is, if he goes, somebody else will replace him, and we'll be back to square one with somebody else.
Well, we've got one. There's one that goes around. Well, there's two of them actually. One trolls in Cornwall, and the other one trolls in Devon. The one in Cornwall, he has already upset the courts a number of times. In one case, he lied about somebody claiming they'd been harassing him, and in fact, he had been acting without lawful authority, and the courts had already told Marston's to stop all enforcement action because a warrant had been issued in error. And this guy just didn't seem to sort of comprehend no warrant, no lawful authority, and he kept threatening to break in and demanding money. And when he realised he had seriously crossed the line, he then made up the story about being harassing. It went to a local magistrate, so they said, we're not happy that this person would get a fair hearing here, so we're transferring it to another one. The magistrate, the JPs down there, they were reasonably young, kind of late 30s, early 40s, pretty savvy, pretty streetwise. I mean, they saw through this guy's lies in about 40 minutes and threw the case out. What it was the guy's solicitor questioned how, you're saying Mr. So-and-so sent you a text message with your family's names, and he said, I was able to find it in 30 seconds on 192.com. As soon as the magistrate said that, they went, what? And he said, yes, I was able to find it in 30 seconds. Case dismissed. And the same one went and tried to... Right, you're not going to believe this. He'd already done a check and found out a vehicle was... there's the conference call coming up. I'll just finish this one off. What he did is he seized a car that was owned by Motability Finance and the other one which had a disabled tax disc. The circuit judge at Truro County Court wasn't impressed. Right. Unfortunately, I've got a conference call I've got to go into, so I'm going to have to come out of this call tonight.
Thank you very much for joining us, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Okay.
We'll have to get you back sometime in the future.
Okay, speak to you again sometime.
Technology stuff.
Bye now.
Bye.
Gotta love him.
That's fabulous. I don't know if Vin's back with us just yet.
Don't know, I can hear some underwater stuff again.
I don't think he is here, Dandy.
No. What I would like to do, we can just make firstly mention Graham Hart, who's on after us tonight. Basically ready for Graham anyway, so Graham's got the wonderful Pat Belden on tonight with him, so that'll be a fascinating show. But this morning I got a call quite early from Mickey Summers, who's a regular on the show, and Mickey was really up, and he asked me if I'd read out the press release, because they've had quite a significant breakthrough this week. And it simply says, it just disappeared then. Today, survivors from the Nottinghamshire Child Sexual Abuse Inquiry Action Group and East Midlands survivors met with representatives of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, established under Judge Goddard to examine the extent to which state and non-state institutions and authorities failed in their duty to protect children from harm. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss how survivors were to be central in the outcomes of the Goddard inquiry, to brief the central team on the landscape in Nottinghamshire and survivors' concerns of the continued obstructions and deceptiveness of the authorities, seeking to minimise their responsibility of decades of abuse of children, and to establish the boundaries of the national inquiry with the possibility of a more specific local inquiry. Mickey Summers, survivor and campaigner, Nigel O'Mara, survivor and campaigner, Joni Cameron Blair, survivor and whistleblower, having been employed as a children's home inspector, along with David Hollis, the group chair, were able to air their general concern with the conduct of the police operation Daybreak and Series, which has still to see any prosecution after 5 years of investigation, despite an unprecedented level of survivors coming forward to give evidence and their concerns, with the apparent unwillingness of city and council authorities to engage survivors and opening themselves to public scrutiny with an independent local inquiry. The decision with the Goddard team necessarily broad as the discussion with the Goddard team, necessarily broad as they move forward, clearly gave much confidence to the survivors group of the determination of Goddard not only to deliver a cathartic experience and allow survivors to tell of their experiences. Not only that, Goddard was determined to ensure all necessary lessons are learned and recommendations made to ensure that the institutional abuse of children can never happen again, but also that where there is evidence of failure by those that were supposed to protect children, that they too will be exposed and brought to account. In terms of the necessity of a local inquiry, it became clear that if Nottingham were to be elected as a case study, then there would be no need for anyone else to conduct alternative inquiries, as they were confident that the established lines of inquiry would deliver the exposure here in Nottingham that survivors and whistleblowers have been seeking to achieve, and indeed the architecture of that local dimension of the inquisitorial aspects of Goddard could be used as the template for other areas considered for case study status, such as Islington. There was clearly more to do, but survivors left the meeting knowing that Goddard would get to the truth and were prepared to listen to survivors. It is expected that greater clarity of the proposed regional truth sessions that will allow survivors to tell their stories will come late autumn, along with confirmation or otherwise that Nottingham will be a case study and the mechanics of how that will operate. So, quite a big breakthrough there, and we're expecting Mickey to be able to come on and talk to us along with David Hollis and Jeremy Cameron Blair sometime in the near future.
I think that would be good. I think that's a very interesting inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
I think it's pivotal on what's going on there, and let's face it, harming children is about as bad as you can get, isn't it?
Well, it's the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
Don't get any lower. I personally don't understand what motivates people to even contemplate it, let alone do it, but that's just me. I think,
we just messaged from that Nick's got a song ready. So are we about due for a tea break?
Yep.
Oh, Ben, if you'd like to take it away.
Welcome back to Enemy Within, live on peoplesinternetradio.com. Sorry about the sound issues tonight. We're just moving through the Van Allen belt right now. Just fading out. But this site is listener supported, and it does rely on donations. There's a lot of people out there don't understand that things cost money, and if it doesn't get donations, then things can disappear, because, you know, when things are tight, things disappear. So if you can share a little bit of money, a few pennies, anything, please click the donation button on the site here at peoplesinternetradio.com, and it's much appreciated. And of course, here on peoplesinternetradio.com, we're always seeking solutions, and we have a very active chat room on here, and we always welcome questions and recommendations. So, welcome back to the show on Enemy Within with our guest today, Joe Hoban.
hi.
Hello.
Been well behaved so far.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how you doing keeping the child under control?
I've locked them in the cellar.
It's not the children you need to worry about, Tom, it's Joe.
Exactly.
No, I'm behaving as well, so no problems there. Interesting chat with Michael, though. He's got a broad experience about a lot of the issues that you cover. And I think that certainly as Beat the Bailiffs has developed, we as a group have started to cover more social aspects of life and the problems that people face, and we are dealing with that. Not so much me, but others, more and more every day with the problems that they're facing, because people are now questioning things and asking for help and direction about where to go. And I think, mentioning the Goddard inquiry just sort of brought that to a head, really, because not too many years ago, nobody would have questioned anything. They would have just taken things on the chin and just accepted what was given to them. Whereas now they're not, and it doesn't matter whether it's involvement of social services or it's a tax credit overpayment or whatever it is. people are now questioning, and I think that is a fabulous thing, because a lot of the time these things are not right and they're not justified and they do need looking at. So I'm quite pleased that that's happening. And although the title of the group is Beat the Bailiffs, that's not everything that we do. And I think that will expand more and more as time goes on.
Well, it's a revolution of the internet. Like you said, people do think that you're alone. I remember when I got involved in alternative radio, when I actually found out information on the internet and realised that there was other people out there that actually thought the same way I did.
Yeah.
I thought, hang on a minute, I thought I was just a weirdo.
But there's so much information out there that you can go and you can look up and you can research, so people can educate themselves. But sometimes they just need the helping hand, don't they? Just to give them that extra push to take the next step. So I think the internet is absolutely fabulous in terms of research and information. But you've got to be careful, because some of it is way off the mark. And you can read 2 articles about the same thing with completely contradictory views, opinions, or supposed facts. So I think you just need to be careful what you look at. But there is information out there. But I am pleased at the number of people who are now questioning things rather than just taking things. Even if it's just small things like your bank charges. You know, what are you being charged for? Why are you being charged them? Is it at the right rate? Should you be charged them? You know, and people are questioning them, because at the end of the day, people work hard for the money. And why should they be handing it over to a bank just because the bank says so?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many people that I've actually met. They were just normal people who were just going to work every day, and they say that they've used the sites like getoutfree.org, they've seen the site Beat the Bailiffs. It's like, wow, people are waking up, because, you know, it's social media. Social media, people are posting things. Friends of people are obviously posting things, so they're seeing it. It's a revolution of the internet. It's a revolution of information. Whereas you got one side of the argument all the time before the inventing of the internet.
Well, I think that people were just expected to accept. Mm-hmm. That's how everybody was channeled. I mean, if I look at my parents and my grandparents, you know, they just accepted that was right, you know, and if the bank said you owed X, then you did. Not to question it and challenge it, which fortunately, I mean, my parents are still alive and I have educated them and I have said, don't just accept this. And when certain situations have arisen, I've said, challenge it. Oh, well, we can't because the bank say this. And it's like, no, you can. And they have done, and they've been successful. So they have learned, albeit at an older age. But I think the younger people, as they're coming through, they are more questioning by nature. And I don't know whether viewers out there have got children, but I've got 4 teenagers who question everything. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't help that they've got me as a mother, but they are of their own mind and they do question everything rather than just accepting what they're told. That they do go away and they do look things up and they do question. And that is going to happen more and more as the younger people grow older and the younger ones come through. We will have a society where people will not just sit back and take what they're told as read. They will make their own inquiries and they will do their own thing to justify or not what they're being told.
Well, I think we're still in a confusion stage at the minute because the information has just hit us so quickly. The stuff that people are seeing on the internet now, it's just like it's so much to compute. People are still confused, but the questioning and everything, and
yes,
eventually they're going to know where the sources are to find the answers to those questions, and credible sources, and they'll have counter arguments to those. One of the things that I push on the show all the time is always try to debunk yourself, or always try and find the counter argument and then come to a conclusion after you've read both sides of the story.
Absolutely. You know, everybody's capable of making their own mind up, and nobody, Nobody should have something rammed down the throat if they don't believe in it, and they should be allowed to go off and make up their own minds and do their own thing. And who is anybody to stop anybody?
Well, it's the way they've separated society, that everybody reads a certain newspaper, or used to. They'd read a certain newspaper, and that newspaper made back Labour, or that made back the Tories. So it's going to be one viewpoint. And I mean, I talk to my parents now, and I'll say, "Oh, did you hear about this?" And they say, "No." And I'll say, "Oh, it's in the news." It's not on my news. And then they say it's a lie. It's like, "Well, I haven't heard about that." You talk a load of crap there, and I'm going, because it's not on your newspaper or it's not on Sky News, you think it's false. I talk to people at work all the time. I mean, they were calling me a conspiracy theorist for telling them news. They're saying, "What's the conspiracy today, Tom?" And I'm thinking, "What are you talking about? What's the news?" I was only telling you what's in the news.
But it is naivety on the part of a lot of people. They don't look far and wide. They're quite happy to go out and buy the Mirror or the Sun or the Daily Mail or the Independent, whatever. And what's printed is gospel.
It's something that's just dying out over time, but you're still going to have the odd person who's just going to have a strict viewpoint. He's going to be in support of one thing, so he's only going to read the things that are in support of that. I meet people all the time who have one viewpoint, and they only read the things that support their viewpoint.
Yeah, but you see, I think that's the danger of politics, really, because, you've got, I'm a member of the Conservative Party, I'm a member of the Labour Party, well, I'm a Liberal, and they have to stick by what that party policy is. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're your own person, I do not believe that any one set of policies can just fit your ideals, because there are things cross-party that are equally good, or maybe better. So why not say, well, actually, this is our policy, but I think theirs is better. They don't look at that. It's just this blinkered view of it's one or it's the other, and I don't think life's like that. I think I've got some sympathy with politicians because they do have their hands tied somewhat, but I by and large think they're a set of numpties who are brainwashed. So if a party comes up with a policy, they all follow it to the letter. They know it chapter and verse, and they quote it here, there, and everywhere. But deep down, do they actually believe it? Well, I think that they've never actually even thought about it. I think they've been told that's the policy, and so that's it. You never hear, or very rarely hear, of anybody questioning their own party's policy, and I don't understand why.
Well, exactly. I think that the major problem is career politicians. I really think that they go through university and then they get out and just pick a colour. Just go, I'm going to be red, I'm going to be blue.
Well, I think you're right.
Because it just pays anyway. They don't care. They sit on the back bench. They get paid.
They do. I think at the end of the day, you see, there are a lot of politics degrees around in the various universities. And they are, when they're studying, there is that leaning towards, well, what about Parliament? Well, if you go to Parliament, you've got to be in a party, otherwise you've got no chance of being elected. I mean, how many independents are there? Not many. So the only way to get in is if you have a colour, whatever that colour may be. Why they want to be politicians, I don't know. I think they've got a thankless task. I think the way that the whole system works is heading for a downfall. And I think something radical needs to be done somewhere to strike a balance for the benefit of the country, and it's not happening at the moment.
We have such an old-fashioned system. There's an old-fashioned system across the world. Like I just said, we're going through a revolution of information, and a lot of things are just becoming outdated overnight. But like, hang on a minute, we've got a queen who wears a fur coat and a hat, and people bow down to her. What are we doing? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, because people are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you only have to go back 100 years, which is not long in terms of history.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the monarch was the most powerful person in the country, and technically, I suppose the Queen is now.
Mm-hmm.
Although she doesn't get involved in politics per se and in the day-to-day stuff, she's still there in the background overseeing it all. And I mean, she is, I would say, more of a figurehead these days than a ruler. I think it's nothing more than that, and we pay an awful lot of money for that privilege, and whether we should, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I think that the royals obviously own a lot of land, they own a lot of assets, so they're obviously going to have influence.
Well, yes. Yes, they will. And whether they're a monarchy or not, they'll still have ownership of a lot of it.
And they still have the same rights to dissolve Parliament. The Queen's still the head, so the Queen's courts. They have a lot more power, but it's a lot. Well, it's behind the scenes. That's it.
Well, it is behind the scenes. I think that's the thing. She's not. I don't know. I think, you know, you go back to the days of Henry VIII, and they were out there in your face.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen now. But there's a lot to be said for the way that countries are run with that don't have a monarchy. Are they any better than ours? Are they worse than ours? I think if you went to those countries, they've got different views about the way their countries are run as well. So I don't know if there is an ideal situation or what would benefit the country as a whole. Because at the moment, I think I don't think there's an easy answer.
Well, we're talking about politicians. The thing that people say is anybody who wants to become a politician should be a politician.
Yeah.
It's like when they debate things about the NHS or anything like that. I'm thinking, well, it shouldn't be these guys debating it. It should be doctors and nurses who are debating it. It's not going to affect them. They're totally out of touch. That's the thing.
That's been the argument for the last umpteen years, that politicians are out of touch with real people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you get very few that are actually decent constituency MPs. You know, they wheel them out when an election's coming up, or there's a European election or something like that. You'll see them out and about, but by and large, you don't. I'm not saying they don't do work behind the scenes, because a lot of them do, but they're not as they're not as prevalent in the media locally.
Mm-hmm.
In between elections, shall we say?
Getting back to the bailiff stuff, what would you actually say to somebody who wanted to start to fight back and get involved?
Well, it's quite funny, is that, because it does happen. Sadly, it happens to people who have been on the receiving end of a rather nasty bailiff. And their own experience spurs them on. So sometimes they've actually got that bit of knowledge and education that they've learnt in a very short space of time that they can build on. For anybody starting from scratch, well, you've got to read. You can't help anybody if you don't know what you're talking about. You've got to know the basics. I mean, if somebody wants to help bailiff problems, then the first place you've got to go is the taking control of goods regulations and the national standards. And you've got to learn what's in those. Once you've got those, then you can work from there to all the other things that are attached to it, depending on different circumstances. But without the basics, you've got no chance. You've got to start somewhere. And that, I think, is the best place to start.
I think one of the great points that Michael brought up was the police protecting bailiffs.
Oh, that pisses me off.
Yeah, I think that's why the bailiffs are really going beyond anything you would even expect. You would even expect them to do, because they're starting to get this front, they're starting to get this ego that the police are going to protect them.
Yeah, you openly get bailiffs saying, I am going to phone the police for assistance.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And unfortunately, the police think they can give it. And it's almost as though they're working in tandem, but it comes back to what Michael and I were discussing earlier, in that the police are as ignorant of bailiff powers, of what they can and cannot do. They are absolutely oblivious. I think one of the problems is that the police hear the word warrant, and in their mind it's automatic forced entry, not, it's a warrant of control for a parking ticket where forced entry is not allowed. They've got no understanding of the difference between a civil warrant and a criminal warrant, and what the bailiffs can and cannot do. And as sadly we see time and time again, the police do side with them to the detriment of the debtor, and it's only in the aftermath do they realise what they've done. And that goes not just for constables, it goes for those of a higher rank as well, who just think that the bailiffs have the right to do what they want, and they don't. So it's no wonder, really, that the bailiffs are lording the way around the country with this gung-ho attitude of we can, because they have got the support of the police. I mean, occasionally you will get a sensible policeman who will take time to just look at what you're saying and will listen. And if you can get that, then you generally get the support of the police, and they will be fair, and they won't allow the bailiff to do anything that they shouldn't. I mean, I have had on one occasion where a police officer actually got his mobile phone out and actually looked up the regulations and looked at what we were saying to him. He even looked up Section 26, which he'd never heard of, and within 10 minutes, the clamp was off and everybody had left the scene. It was the quickest thing. The whole thing lasted 20 minutes from beginning to end. And the police just said, we're not having this. Clamp off you go. And that was it. The bailiff disappeared, never to be seen again.
I've seen it.
So, it does happen.
I've seen a lot of videos. And I've seen quite a few, actually, where the police officer just stops the whole thing. Just stops the bailiff.
Yes, they do.
Because they're doing the job. They're seeing exactly the situation. Well, he's not doing things by the book straight away, and they go, right, you're just going to have to get in the car and go. And I've seen so many of those, but the majority I've seen, some of them are absolutely horrifying, where you actually see the police officers, there'll be two of them, they just sit in the car, there'll be fights going on, there'll be all sorts going on. They've been called to stop the breach of the peace, apparently, and they don't even interfere.
Well, that's taking it to the extreme the other way, isn't it? Where they're just not interested. I think with bailiffs, we would have a serious problem if they did their job as they should. We wouldn't have groups like we've got, because we wouldn't be able to argue with anything that they did if they stuck to what they should do. But it's this flouting of their powers, and the one thing that really gets to me is and it always happens to single women or mothers at home on their own, it's never the men, are the threats and the lies that they make, which are completely false, they're totally wrong, and they absolutely frighten the living daylights out of people, and I object to. I mean, we've had, they've threatened, we're just waiting for social services to come and collect your children while we sort you out.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that.
I mean, what sort of a comment's that? We can break in for council tax. Since when? And all this goes on, but if people are being told this on the doorstep, they believe it. Now, we might have 29,000 members, but there's, 65, 72 million or whatever it is people live in this country now? There were 3.3 million liability orders for council tax in England and Wales last year. How many of those went to bailiffs? So how many are we not getting? And how many people are being intimidated into paying the bailiffs because of the fear that's put in them?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly what I said with the court system. It's an intimidation factor that puts people off. And it's exactly what bailiffs use. They use intimidation where they make people think that they're carrying out things lawfully. But it's not. They're not even intimidating with what they're allowed to do. They're intimidating, implying that they have powers over and above those that they actually have. And that's what's wrong. Yeah, I mean, if you've got somebody who owes money for council tax and they leave the front door open and a bailiff walks in, you're a bit stuck because he's allowed to. But if you've locked your door and he breaks your door in and says, "I'm coming in for council tax," we know he can't do that. But will the person on the other side of the door? Chances are they probably won't. And that's the problem that people don't know. But people realise, like I said, there's the wealth of information out there, and like I said, there's so different things that actually happen when a bailiff comes. Sometimes the police carry out the duties as they should. So people see those things on YouTube and they go, "Hang on a minute, this is different." Like you said, these groups wouldn't exist if they carried out the duties the way they should do, because there'd be no comeback. But well, people say, "Hang on a minute, the police did this there and they didn't do it there. Well, what's going on here?"
And that's exactly the point. And I think the trouble with the bailiffs across the country is they do abuse the jobs. They also impersonate one another, which is quite another story. But even when they're faced with somebody who's clearly vulnerable, when they're supposed to back off, they don't even do that. Instead of taking a step back and thinking, okay, I've got this situation, I've got this person, not having done the risk assessment that Michael referred to earlier, where they are supposed to do the health and safety check and make sure that everything's all right, totally ignoring that and never having done it. Even when faced with a cast iron vulnerable situation, they don't back off. They still carry on. And that is just madness.
I think it's like I said, I think it's an ego thing.
Oh, it is, without a doubt.
They become bigger than the job. It's all quarters, and they get a thrill out of it. A lot of them get a thrill out of it. I mean, there is good bailiffs out there, and they do carry out the duties. There's a few of them.
I don't disagree with that at all. I've seen some bailiffs who have been very fair, not stepped outside the remit at all.
You see the human.
You don't have a problem with those.
Yeah, you see the
same names cropping up over and over again. The same people.
You see the humanity in them. You see the videos and the humanity comes out of the bailiff. He goes, okay, right, we'll sort out the payment. All right, you can't pay it. Okay.
I mean, you've got to understand that there's one end game for the bailiffs and one end game only, and that is that they get paid.
Exactly.
They don't care about the fine, or they don't care about the council tax, or they don't care about the council getting paid for the parking ticket. They're not interested. They want their fees, and that's what it's all about, and they will do anything to get them. And the problem is, if they've got to back off with situations and a warrant is returned back to a creditor, the chances are they're not going to get the fees. Now, most of these bailiffs are self-employed bailiffs, so they get paid on results.
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say it, just out of interest. Do they get bonuses for doing certain things?
Well, I don't know whether they get bonuses, but they certainly get paid on results. And, I mean, if the £75 compliance fee letter that goes out, I don't think they'll get a cut of that because it hasn't actually at that point been allocated to a bailiff. But off the 235 for making a visit, even though sometimes that's just putting another letter through the door, they get a cut of that. And I think it depends who you work for as to what the cut is.
It's a crazy situation. I don't even know what the solution is in the end. But what I was going to say earlier, the good thing about Beat the Bailiffs, I said that there's different opinions in any group. But the good thing about Beat the Bailiffs is different opinions is the main point, because everybody's tackling it from a different viewpoint and different ways of tackling it.
Absolutely, and we do, as a team, quite often discuss various points about what can we do about this, or okay, we've got this situation, what can we do in the future to better it? We quite often have Skype chats about various things, just to try and tighten up what we do and make sure that we all know about new things that are being introduced or problems that we've come across. I mean, the latest thing that I've come across is where a vulnerable letter is sent to a bailiff company, rather than them returning it to the creditor, they're now using a different tack of, oh, well, we'll go nicely on the debtor, but get the debtor to pay us.
Huh.
So they're still not, they're not returning it to the creditor. They're just saying, well, okay, we know you're vulnerable, so to that extent, we know you've got no money, so just pay us £5 a week or whatever it might be. And they're doing it that way, whereas before it was all gung-ho, oh no, we've got you, we want all of it and everything else. But what they should do, rather than hang on to it and get the money, is send it back to the creditor, but they're not doing that. And at the end of the day, as I say, it's all about money. It's big business.
So what have
millions.
Mm-hmm. So what's been the biggest successes that people have had against the bailiffs? Can you name any off the top of your head?
We have successes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every week. It's very rare we don't succeed. Although today we had a bit of a blip. And to be honest, I was in a meeting, so I couldn't really keep an eye on what was going on, and I don't really know the ins and outs of what did happen. But that was over a parking ticket and a car was towed. I'm not 100%, so I don't really want to comment about exactly what did happen, as I say, because I wasn't directly involved in it, although I was trying to keep my eye on it. So I don't know what happened there. But 9 times out of 10, we do succeed. I mean, clamp cars, we usually get the clamps off. Forced entry, we can deal with, don't phase us. And if there is a forced entry, then I'm happy as long as they leave with nothing.
So is there any successes where it's actually reversed the intimidation, even though intimidation is not what you're trying to do?
You mean have the police given the bailiff a bollocking?
No, I mean, have the bailiffs changed policy, or they changed their approach because of any success?
No. The only time they change the tack is if they know we're involved. And if they know we're on the end of the phone, their attitude changes. Now, it can change one of two ways. Either they become more aggressive because it's us that they're fighting rather than get money out of the creditor, or they back off because they know that they're not going to get anywhere. Excuse me, I had a situation a couple of weeks ago where 2 bailiffs had got into a woman's house, and I got on the phone to her, and she was talking to me on the phone, and one just said to the other, oh fuck, she's on Facebook, she's on Beat the Bailiffs, we've had it, let's get out of here.
Wow.
And they were gone within 10 minutes. You know, and prior to that, they'd been going to remove all the kids' stuff out of the bedrooms and everything. I mean, all the kids' stuff. That's what they were doing it with. We're going to take all the kids' stuff, and that is what no mother wants. Is, you know, they're not bothered if they take anything of theirs, but please don't touch my kids' stuff. And they'd gone straight for the children's stuff. They'd even been in a bedroom where one of the children was sleeping. But as soon as they knew we were involved, they backed off, and they were gone within 10 minutes. No money, no control goods agreement, no nothing. They just went. Now with that one, we did the vulnerable letters and we did a complaint, and it has been taken very seriously about what they did. So we'll just watch this space on that one. But my view and Michael's view is wherever a bailiff has acted outside his remit, we should be complaining, because it's the only way to bring it to anybody's attention.
You know, a lot of the stuff that's been done through these groups, through like Beat the Bailiffs and various other groups, it used to be done by Citizens Advice. Citizens Advice. I remember my brother, back when I must have been about 11-year-old, he said, I was just in Citizens Advice, and it was amazing to hear one of the Citizens Advice guys talking to a bailiff like they talk to them, to the complainant.
The problem is that Citizens Advice has become institutionalised.
Yep.
And a lot of them are volunteers, so you've got to understand that. Their knowledge is good in certain areas, but it's also flawed in so many others. And whilst they may get on the phone to negotiate a payment plan with the bailiff company, they will never question whether the debt is owed, whether the bailiff should be involved. You know, they don't look at the alternatives. They just deal with what's in front of them. And I think, you know, they're more like robots these days. Years ago, I used to do work for a couple of Citizens Advice bureaus, and when they got legal problems, they would ring up and ask for help. But I don't think any of them really use that now. They keep it internally, and they've got a centralised office where they go for advice. And again, I think it's blinkered. I do think it's blinkered, and I think, you know, it is, when it comes to dealing with debt, it's all about, well, just arrange a payment plan, just do this, do that. And yeah, it does sort people's problems out, but as we know, like with the county court claim forms, a lot of people don't even get them, and the first thing they know is they've got bailiffs at the door because they've been sued at a previous address and the judgment's gone there and they've been oblivious to it. Well, I'm sorry. Why should that person set up a payment plan with the bailiff company for a judgment that should not have been entered in the first place? Surely to God, the obvious thing to do is to say to that person, right, well, this is your situation. You didn't get your claim form. You didn't get your judgment. So what you need to do is go back to the court and apply to have the judgment set aside and get it back to the beginning and then defend it. But they don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
to me, that's the obvious thing to do.
Well, the funding of these groups has been cut and cut and cut over the years, and the government's even talking about getting rid of it. What would be the reason to get rid of Citizens Advice? So nobody knows the rights?
I'm not sure that's the reason, but I think it's more down to money. Mm-hmm. Because all the local councils have to fund it and the government fund it, and they're all saying that they've got no money. But is there a better alternative to Citizens Advice?
Well, that's the thing. Would they replace it with anything?
Well, I don't want them to replace it with anything. Because I think what we've got is better than Citizens Advice. I think Beat the Bailiffs deals with far more issues in a far more in-depth way than Citizens Advice ever would. And I think it comes back to, again, what I was saying at the beginning of the show, that the knowledge across the group is far more capable of dealing with people's problems than Citizens Advice. I mean, if anybody suggests anybody goes to Citizens Advice, I'm absolutely horrified, because I just don't know what advice they're going to get.
Certainly on these issues, they're going to get nowhere these days.
Well, exactly. But I think when Citizens Advice first started, that's what it was. It was advice for the people could go get free advice without having to pay an arm and a leg and know what to do with something. But they don't get that advice now. And I think that's my point. They don't actually, nobody actually sits down and looks at what the problem is and how can it be solved. It's just like, oh no, you've got to pay, and then they'll get on the phone and they will negotiate and they will sort it out. But why should that person be paying for it in the first place? That's what they don't question.
Well, we're at the end of the show for tonight, so thank you for coming on the show, Joe. It's been really interesting. Well, it's been tremendous, actually, except for the sound issues that we've had all night and flying through space.
It's Armageddon.
Exactly. The joys of Skype. It's not the first time. It won't be the last. But thank you very much for coming.
We can all live with it.
But is there any links you want to give out? Obviously, Beat the Bailiffs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think everybody knows where we are on Facebook. Beat the Bailiffs and the Banks. We're there. And, you know, if you're not a member, join us. And if you want to help, we want people that want to help too. So all are welcome. And as you know, we're out and about all over the place. So it's not just me, it's a whole team of us, and we're all doing our own thing to spread the word, and we will continue to do so.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Please check out the Facebook page. It's Enemy Within Radio, all one word, or if you're searching, it's Enemy_Within you want to do. And it's at Enemy Within Talk on Twitter. And we'll be back on Friday. Same place, same time. See you later, folks.
See ya.
Bye.